All right, good morning, guys. Welcome to section 8.3 on rational numbers. All right, and I know some of you have questions about what we're talking about in math, and so this week, I'm going to be offering 2 different times with Zoom sessions where you can pop in with your questions. I'll answer them to the best of my ability and hopefully help you to understand. You don't have to stay the whole time. You can pop in and out of the Zoom session as wanted. So your parents will get that information in an email, so look for that. And know that I really do want you to have good understanding of this, all right? It'll be so helpful to you next year. So look for that information, and I will do all I can to help you. All right, let's start off with a little bit of a review. All right, things that you learned last week. The farther a number is to the right on a number line, the greater it is. All right, so when I'm looking at this number line at the bottom of our slide, I want you to look. If I'm all the way over here to the, if I'm all the way over here to the 7, all right, if I'm all the way over here to the 7, it has greater value than if I'm over here on the -3 because it is further to the right. All right, so the number that is further to the right has greater value. So keeping that in mind, the number that is further to the left has less value. We learned last week that integers are the set of whole numbers and their opposites. But I don't want you to think of an opposite as always being negative, because sometimes they'll say graph a -3 and its opposite. Well, the opposite of a -3 isn't a negative. The opposite of the -3 will be the number that is 3 spaces from 0 going in the opposite direction. So it would be a +3. So integers are the set of whole numbers and their opposites. Or if you want to think of it, a set of positive and negative whole numbers. Remember that 0 is a whole number and it's an integer, but it is neither positive nor negative. All right? It is a whole number, but it is neither positive nor negative. So there is no such thing as a -0. All right, now our new information that we're going to talk about today, and this is where if I were you, I'd write this down so you could have this in front of you when you are taking your next quiz. Rational numbers are numbers that are made up of integers, fractions, and decimals. All right, fractions and decimals were not part of our group last week. They are not part of the integers. All right, integers are only whole numbers. Fractions and decimals represent parts of a whole. So rational numbers now are going to include all of those groups. A rational number is a number that can be written as a over b or as a fraction, where a and b are integers, but b cannot be a 0. All right, so 0 can never be the denominator of a fraction for a rational number. Rational numbers can be positive or negative because integers are in their group. All right, and I know that seems a little confusing, but hopefully you're going to once you start working with them, it'll become more clear to you. So in our fraction, a can be 0 or any integer, positive or negative. In our fraction, b can be any non-zero integer. It can be any integer, negative or positive whole number that is not 0. Okay? Now, I'm going to, hopefully this will give you an understanding. This is a little graph, and it's showing how the numbers are classified. All right, so we start with this group on the inside, the natural numbers. Or sometimes you'll hear some groups that refer to them as counting numbers. And when we count, we don't usually count 0, 1, 2, 3. We usually say 1, 2, 3. When you're counting, like how many pieces of candy you got for Easter or whatever, you would start with the number 1. So those are called natural numbers. All right, whole numbers include 0. All right, and then integers include whole numbers and all natural numbers. So integers now have all whole numbers and their opposites, so negative numbers, and it includes 0. So all three groups are part of the integers. Rational numbers are all of these groups totaled. It includes natural numbers, it includes the whole numbers, it includes negative and positive integers, and now it's going to include fractions and decimals. All right, so these are going to be part of rational numbers along with integers, whole numbers, and natural numbers. It's kind of like saying you live in Jacksonville. Well, you also live in the state of Florida. Or you could say you live in the United States. Those are all true facts. But just because I live in the United States does not mean I live in Jacksonville. There's a lot of people that don't live in Jacksonville, but they live in the United States. So you have to think about it like that, okay? Because I'm in Jacksonville, I am part of the state of Florida. Because I live in Florida, I am part of the United States. So when you think of your numbers, because I'm a whole number, I am part of the integers. Because I'm a whole number and an integer, I am part of the rational numbers. All right, hopefully that will make more sense to you if you stop and think about it like that. All right, now they're going to ask you to graph rational numbers or fractions or decimals, okay? And we can do that. If they ask us to graph 3/4 like they are in this example at the top of our screen, I can go to 3/4 and I have to remember 3/4 is part of a whole. So it has to be before the whole number 1. All right, so I've graphed 3/4. Well, then they say, well, what's the opposite? The opposite is the number that is the same distance from 0 as 3/4. I moved 1, 2, 3 places. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 places. And it is the negative 3/4. I can do the same thing with a decimal. If they told me to graph a negative 1.6, I would go to the left of my 0 where my negative numbers live, and I would find the negative 1.6. If they said to graph its opposite, I would go to the right of 0, and I would find my positive 1.6. And they are the exact number of places from 0. All right, so that should be fairly simple. You're just graphing them on a number line. All right, let's go ahead and practice. Okay, they want me to graph the negative 2 and 1/2. So as soon as I saw that I'm dealing with a negative number, I knew I was going to go to the left of 0. I found my negative 2. Now, where would 2.5 be? Would it be in between 0 and negative 2? Or would it be in between negative 4 and negative 2? Hopefully you chose this one. All right, negative 2.5 is going to be closer to 4 than it is to 0 or to 1. I'm heading in that direction. So I know that if I look at the middle of this, that represents negative 3. So I know negative 2 comes in between negative 2 and negative 3. So I'm going to put my dot right there. And that gives me negative 2 and 1/2. Now, to graph the positive, I'm going to go to my 0. I'm going to go to my positive 2, and I know my answer is going to be in between 2 and 4. I'm going to do the same thing. Okay, here's where my positive 3 is. So I know that my positive 2.5 is in between the 2 and the 3. All right, let's do a fraction. This time they want me to graph a 3/7. There's no sign in front of it, so I know they're talking about a positive number. So I put my dot on 3/7. Now they want me to graph the opposite. So I'm going to go to my 0, and I'm going to go to the left of my 0, and I'm going to find the negative 3/7. And I place my dot there. They are the same distance from 0. All right, does everyone see that? All right, comparing fractions and mixed numbers. They want us to graph each number on the number line, and the number that is to the left is going to be less than the number that is to the right. Now, some of you that have a good working knowledge with negative numbers already or a good understanding, you would probably be able to look at this and figure it out. Some of you are still confused by negative numbers. So you're the people that I want just to draw a simple number line. All right? And I'm dealing, first thing I would look at, are they both negative numbers? Yes. If they aren't, my positive number will always be worth more than my negative number. But they're both negative. And I have a common denominator, which is even better. So I'm going to have a negative 1/7. This will be negative 2/7, negative 3/7, negative 4/7. Okay, well, here is 4/7 on the number line. Here is negative 1/7 on the number line. All right, which one's further to the left? The negative 4/7. So I'm going to put less than. Negative 4/7 is less than a negative 1/7. All right, let's go over here to this one. All right, the first thing I check is, are they both negative numbers? And they are. Now the next thing I'm noticing is I have thirds and I have sixths. All right, in order to solve this and to know which one is less than or greater than, I'm going to have a common denominator. So I look at this and I say, well, 3 can go into 6. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to change 1 2/3 to 6ths. All right, I keep my whole number the same. The only thing I'm doing is make an equivalent fraction. 3 times 2 is 6, so 2 times 2 is 4. 1 4/6, if I were to reduce 4/6, I would get 1 2/3. Okay, so now I am comparing, if I want to compare apples to apples or sixths to sixths. So now I have a 1 4/6 right here. So which one is greater? Well, and it's a negative, negative 1 4/6. So if I'm going to graph it on my number line, all right, and I have negative 1 here, then I have negative 1 2/6, negative 1 4/6, negative 1 5/6, and then my next number would be negative 2, because negative 2 would be negative 1 6/6. That would equal 2. All right, so I can graph it now, and I can say, okay, well, negative 4/6 is right here. Negative 5/6 is right here. Well, which one's further to the left? Negative 1 5/6. So my sign will go like this. Negative 1 2/3 is greater than negative 1 5/6, because negative 1 5/6 is further to the left. All right, just one more thing that we're going to talk about today, and that's comparing rational numbers that are decimals. All right, so if we're going to compare decimals, I think this is even easier. I'm going to look at my whole number first, and I'm going to look to see if I have a negative sign. If this is negative, I already know it's less, and this is positive. I already know my negative will always be less than my positive. Now over here, they both are negative, and they both start with the same whole number. So now I have to look at the tenths place. I have a 6 and I have an 8. All right, so think about your number line. If you were to draw one, think negative 4.6. So if I have a negative 4.2, a negative 4.4, a negative 4.6, and a negative 4.8. Okay, Which one's less? Right, the negative 4.8 is. So negative 4.6 is greater than negative 4.8. All right, let's do our last one. And don't let it, because it's a long number, fool you, but I also want you to be aware and just be careful and watch your numbers. Always check first for the signs. They're both negative. So I have to look at the next thing. They both have 3 for a whole number. I've got to go to the next place. They both have 5 for the 10th place. So far, they're equal. This is where they're going to change. Look, this has a 2 and this one has a 4. So when I'm dealing with negative numbers, this number would be greater in value than this number. Does everyone see that? If I were to put it on a number line, a negative, think of money, that you owe money. Do you want to owe $3.52 or $3.54? $3.52, you have more money in your pocket than you will if you had $3.54 that was being owed to someone. So if it helps you to think about money, do that. All right, now we're going to order rational numbers. All right, so again, look for your negative. Your negative number will always be your least in value, so it's going to come first. Separate your numbers with commas. Now I'm done with this one, so let's look at what I have left. These two start with a whole number 1. I have a 0 and a 0, and they're all positive. So if I was doing a number line, my 0 would go here, and I would start working on my whole numbers. That would be number 1. Let's put number 2 down here. All right, which would come next, 1.2 or 1.6? 1.2 comes before 1.6 when we're going to the right. Okay, so now I can put them in order. Sometimes just drawing it out on a number line. All right, so I have 0.1. My next one's going to be 0. My next one's going to be 1.2. My next one, oh wait, I made a mistake. I forgot one of my zeros. My next one's going to be 0.8. Sorry about that. And then it's going to be 1.2 and then 1.6. And my 0.8 on my number line should be in here. All right? Because it's before the whole number 1. All right? And it's easy to make a mistake like that. So go back and always check your work. All right. Let's look at this last one. They're all negative numbers. All right? I'm going to get rid of some of this other work so it doesn't confuse us. So when we look at this, hopefully we won't have any confusion. All right. So let's look at this. These are all negative numbers. Okay? -2, -2, -2, -2, -3. Well, I know that one's the least in value because it's the greater. So I'm going to get rid of that. Now, look again what I've got. I've got tenths, fifths, and halves. It is better to find a common denominator. So I always ask, can the smaller numbers go into the larger? Can 2 go into 10 evenly? Yes. So I can change 1/2 to tenths. Can 2/5, can 5 go into 10 evenly? Yes. So I'm going to change 2/5 to tenths. 5 times 2 is 10. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 5 is 10. 1 times 5 is 5. And to check my work, I know that if I were to reduce 4 tenths, I would get 2/5. If I reduced 5 tenths, I would get 1/2. I haven't changed its value. I've just made it easier for me to compare. So if you want to come above 5 tenths, or 2/5, and write 4 tenths, and come above 1/2 and write 5 tenths, that might be helpful to you. And remember, negative numbers, the further they are to the left, the less value. So I've got 3/10, 4/10, 5/10. Which one's least? Hopefully you said the 5/10. Okay, so I'm going to put my 2.5 here. All right, so I've used 2.5. I'm done with it. Now what's going to come? Right, the 4/10. So I'm going to put 2 and 2/5. Okay, I'm done with this one. I'm left now with a -2 and 3/10 and a -2. All right, and all of these should have negative signs. All right, -2 and 3/10. Got it. And then I know -2 will be my last one. And I've got 5 numbers. Count them up. Make sure you have all your numbers. Make sure you have the right order. They all have their negative signs. And that's how you order rational numbers.